Let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Mindfulness of New Beginnings as part of the Diversity Project's mental health awareness events. So I share the floor today with Dr. Stacie Graham, who's a management consultant, executive coach, founder, speaker, and writer. Some of you will already be familiar with her. I'm Dinesha Mendes. I'm head of RFP at Close Brothers Asset Management. I'm also ambassador of the Diversity Project and founder of Sunday Unplugged, a private wellbeing events business. I'm also a yoga teacher and a mindfulness teacher. And I trained here at Tri Yoga in London in restorative and in the Shivananda tradition. So I don't know about you, but I'm really ready for a new beginning after this pandemic. This is probably the first time in my life that I felt this way about needing a new beginning. And when I talk about new beginnings, I usually mean a blank canvas. I need a brand new page. And for those of you who attended my first talk, the mindfulness of travel, which I also did with Stacie, you'll remember that in 2014, I decided to completely unplug from my life and go off and disappear. I put my stuff into storage and went traveling for almost 2 years. Now, I've been reflecting on that quite a lot, actually, because what do we do? How do we forge new beginnings when we're not going to go off and do something as radical as that? At the time when I was thinking about new beginnings, I thought of wanting to find a new color, a new model, a new expression of who I already was. And what I found over the years, this is quite important, is that there's not really an end point to new beginnings. A lot of you will probably do the same thing on New Year's Eve. So you've come from a tradition where on the 31st of December, you have a few drinks, you look back at your year, and then you look forward at this next year, and then magically the clock hits 12 o'clock and you set some resolutions. Now, in my case, I've done this over and over again over the decades, and I always find just around Valentine's Day, so about 6 weeks into the new year, I've usually given up on half of those resolutions. So what I've been trying to do over the last few years is try to find a new system and a new way of looking at those. And both here in London, but also all around the world, I've had the great pleasure of working with really different teachers, coaches, shamans, yoga teachers, Amazonian plant medicine people, and therapists. And ultimately, I boil this down to 3 angles. So there are 3 ways I could be mindful of forging a new beginning. The first one is, what is your vision? How do I see myself in the future? And here, vision, I think of it here as the eyes. Secondly is, what are my intentions? How can I set an intention towards that vision? So here I think of this as my hands and on to create things, and my legs in order to get things moving. And then the last thing is, what is your purpose? So now this is something that's deep inside every single cell of your body. It's in your heart, and it's something that's really in the very core of your being. So just to give you an example, my vision, my long-term vision, is to have a yoga retreat center somewhere out in the countryside. And I see very clearly a big long table with people who are happy. There's a sense of community, there's plates full of food, and there's music and candles. So my intention at the moment is that I have to do things to become that person. That means I have practical things I have to consider, but it also means that I'm constantly evolving in who I am as a well-being practitioner towards that vision. And this very moment right now, sharing this workshop, is actually part of that vision as well. My purpose is something that I have to do, that I can hold on to whilst I'm still working in the investment management industry. So every time that I enter a meeting room, my purpose is to bring well-being into that space. So I tried on all these Zoom calls, I try to bring a smile or a laughter to people in that meeting. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about those ideas and concepts, and then I'll hand over to the wonderful Stacie. So starting off with vision, I found that actually I needed a little bit of help on how to do this. First of all, I didn't really know how to find my vision. And secondly, what I wanted in my vision was changing all the time. Um, so, how can you create a vision? Well, this is something that doesn't happen overnight. And it's something that has to be articulated over time. So, we've got to be very patient with this. We don't always know what we want, and what we want can change over time. And a few years ago, I attended this talk with the great philosopher Alan de Botton, School of Life. Definitely look him up. And he offered this incredibly wonderful solution, this hack to it. And Alan de Botton suggested that you keep a little list. So this can be in a notebook, it can be on your phone, as in my case. And you log, you keep a hold of every time you feel the emotion of envy. So, for example, you might have a colleague who's just bought a cottage in the Cotswolds, and you might feel envious. You might hear that a friend has gone off and opened a web shop on Amazon and is making additional income. You might hear that someone's gotten married. So every time you feel that little tinge of envy in you, and again, this doesn't happen every day, it might not even happen in a week, you keep a log of it. And then over time, you'll see slowly that these are all little clues, and they are signposts of where you should be heading and what you really want. And you can translate that log into a vision. So, as I said, this is not something you can necessarily do in a week. Some of you might be able to, and I think that's wonderful. It took me quite some time, but eventually you will see that picture. And the other thing is, this is very, very important, is not just to have a list on your phone. Draw the picture, physically pull out a notepad, go to Ryman's, buy yourself some markers, get a big pad, and make a drawing or take clippings from magazines and physically create a vision board and put it somewhere visible that you can see it. You might put it in your bedroom if you don't want other people to see it, but you find a physical place to keep this vision that you will see every single day. Now, you've created the vision board and that's it, right? Now you're on your way. No. No, actually, just creating a vision board doesn't mean that much. You need to grow some legs on this and you need to get this thing going. Now, some of you might be very good at creating a vision, and some of you might very naturally find ways to find little small micro goals to get yourself going. But I wasn't. I needed to work with coaches. And I do encourage you to explore coaching. There's lots of people who do that. Stacie does it, for example, and there's lots of people out there. You can just Google them. But it's a little bit like the mortgage advice and the financial advice scene. There's a lot of people out there who are certified. And I encourage you to find someone who is accredited by the International Coaching Federation, but also someone who has some life experience, and who can demonstrate some inner resilience on overcoming their own obstacles. So can I have the first slide, please, Caroline? The one thing that came up a lot in the coaching that I've done is this concept of the wheel of life. And this is an idea that was developed by Paul Meyer back in the 1960s in helping people articulate their goals, essentially. So this wheel that you see here actually has lots of different forms, and people in coaching can call it the wheel of success. They call it the life balance wheel, or the wheel of fortune even. But the purpose of this is all the same. This is about transformation. And in order to transform, you need a concept and you need to have clarity of what you're actually trying to do. So what we see here is ultimately a practical, flexible tool that helps people assess what their needs are. And with this, once you can assess what your needs are, you can align those to your core values. So usually there's about 8 or 10 things. These are sort of the categories that I've seen in most different coaching models. So the first one here is money and finances. We have career and work, health and fitness, fun and recreation, environment. So with that, it's sort of the environment that you inhabit. So that could be your home, or it could be your workplace. Community, family and friends, partner and love, personal growth and learning, and spirituality. And now actually what I've done, for example, I've swapped some of these things out. So I wanted one section to be creativity because that was important to me. So I also encourage you to do your own categories of this. The other thing to note is that doing this exercise, so what you do is basically you draw little circles around those numbers and you make an assessment of where you stand on a scale of 1 to 10. But here, this is not for overthinking. So you're not supposed to sit there for hours and work this out. I did this in probably about 20 minutes, because you will know where you stand on what your satisfaction levels are of your current circumstances in all these different categories. So what you have here is that a high level is that you'll have some clues and some insights on whether your life is in balance. But then also in more detail, you'll see this will give you an idea of where you're discontented and where you have to really work on things. So just by having a little model and rating yourself, you're not just providing input into your goal setting process, but you're also getting a bit of visibility on where you're struggling and where you have difficulties. But also, which I found very rewarding, you'll see where you're really good at, and you can take quite a lot of confidence from that. So once you've had a chance to do this, if I just go to slide 2, please, Caroline. So this is what it'll look like once you've drawn some pictures, and that's your little model. And then the next slide, slide 3, please. These are some questions, and I can send you this, or you can take a screenshot. So my details are there at the bottom. Once you've done this model, there's also something to consider, a little bit of reflection. So some of these are sort of the most useful questions I found, and I encourage you to do this with a coach, or you could do it with a trusted friend. And the first one is that when you look at the shape of the wheel, how does that actually make you feel? How do you feel about your snapshot of your life? Now, when you look at that inner circle that I've just shown you just now, the green one, how would you like that to change? What surprises you the most? And I always find that everyone who does this has surprises. What does a 10 look like? What is your understanding? What is your concept of a 10 in those categories? Where would you like to improve? Where would you like to start with? Because you can't do all of them at once. And also, very importantly, how are you spending time in each of these areas? And what do you need to improve in all of these areas? Also very powerful is looking at the small steps. So what will have the most significant impact on your satisfaction levels? And my favorite one is, there one thing that you can change that will have an impact on your little map? Is there one thing that will kind of overlap with lots of those categories? Thank you, Caroline. So what we see here is that you can split things up into all these categories, but what's very, very important is that you do not need to be a 10. I don't know anyone who's a 10 in all those categories, and if you do know someone, please send them my way. I would love to learn from them. But the other thing I found as I began working with this model is that it's okay to get to a 5. So if there's areas of your life where you think you're just a 1 or even a 0, you're not going to try to shoot for the 10 immediately. You might want to go for a 3 and then a 5 and a 7. And you do this very slowly and with compassion towards yourself, and with radical kindness. So what we've seen here is that the Wheel of Life works on multiple levels. It really helps you focus on what your life feels like right now, but it also gives you a bit of meaning. It helps you understand what these categories are, what is wrong, what is right. It's also very important. And it helps you find a little bit of, it gives you some tools on how to do your transformation and how to forge a new beginning. Now, I know that some of this feels a little bit formulaic and even mathematical, and you might recognize some of this from work where you're doing performance ratings and so on. So I want to kind of take a step back from that and say this isn't just about using your head and looking at the numbers. There's actually a few other things to consider, and this is when you're setting an intention, it's very, very important that it's something that comes from your heart. And it's not something that you're off here in the machinery of your mind creating. It's something that's in the depths of your soul, and it's something that you can access. It's already there. You don't have to create it from scratch. It's something that's within you that you can access. Now, I think of intentions as a directed, concentrated form of energy. And if you think of your intentions as, again, I love the garden analogy because it always works for me, like little seeds. And you can't just go off and buy the seeds and leave them on your dining room table like I have for a year and I forgot to plant things. No, you need to plant them. You need to go off and do something with them. And before you do that, though, before you go off and find a fertile ground for your seeds to grow and flourish, um, I found in order to access that inner truth that I had to get myself into the zone. And I encourage you to explore a mindfulness practice. We've talked about this before. There's lots of apps and tools online that can help you. Now that the yoga centers are open, you can go off and find mindfulness classes there, or even there's meditations as part of the yoga practice. But another thing to consider when you're getting yourself into the zone is to find that little space. It's to find your own definition and your own feeling of that space. And I find the zone somewhere between my inhale and my exhale. So when I'm doing meditation, when I manage to do meditation, between my inhale and my exhale, there's a space. And it's possible to stay in that space. I'm not asking you to stop breathing, but it's possible to stay in the zone. And what's important in that zone, you can see the blank screen, you can see that empty page, and you can feel a sense of freedom. So the other thing to consider is a little bit your environment. What do you need to create? And for me, I found, as a family person with lots of commitments and lots of people asking me for things, in my case, the easiest way for me to get into the zone is to go off and climb a mountain and sit in silence. But now that I'm in London and I'm still not traveling anywhere, for me, it's actually on a Saturday night. It's quite late. People have gone to sleep. And it happens usually after midnight. So the city, I'm here in London, the rhythm of the city starts slowing down and the traffic dies down and everything becomes smaller and quieter. And I found that usually in those really weird morning hours of 1 a.m. on a Saturday, I feel quite a lot of creativity because I feel myself aligning with the rhythm of the city. Now, something else I found is that when you're setting intentions, you have to give yourself permission to be in superpower mode. So an intention is a lot more powerful when it comes from a place of contentment than when it comes from a needy place. So an intention is something, I'll say it again, it's cultivated from your heart and it comes from your gut. It comes from your inner truth. So it's not something that you go off and find on the Instagram feed or someone's doing a video. It's something that your higher self, so the highest form of yourself, knows that everything is going to be okay. When you're setting this intention, you know you can get there. And you might not know the ins and outs of this, but you know you're going to get to your vision, and you know you can set your intention and that everything is going to be all right. Something else I learned about intention setting, and this is a challenge, is that I had to learn how to completely detach myself from the outcome. I know this is a paradox, but bear with me. So what's really important is that intentions don't come from a place of fear or a place of insecurity. So I'm actually okay where I am with my life right now. I can operate my life at this very moment. I'm not clinging onto my intentions. I'm not suffocating this idea. I'm not beating myself up for not being where I want to be. My intentions they coexist alongside my daily life. So it's just sort of like another program running on the computer, but it's not one that takes up my energy. And with intentions, it's very important that you have this unquestioning belief in your true self that your garden is going to grow. So I've put the seeds in. I do not know when it's going to rain, or rather when the sun is going to come out if you're in the UK at the moment. I don't know when the sun is going to come. I don't know when it's going to rain, but at some point this garden will grow. Something will blossom, and I know it will happen. And I'm just going to sit here and hold this thought. The hardest challenge about intention setting for me was letting the universe handle all the details. So some people, there's different words for the universe. So some people call it the higher power, some people call it God. I work with universe. But it's, you know, that you've thrown your seeds in, and just by doing that, you're activating, you're propelling the machinery of the universe in motion. And you trust, you know that this universe will deliver, even if you don't know how long it'll take. Your seeds have been planted into fertile ground. The ground is your potential. Then things will blossom when the season is right. You stay open to opportunities and to possibilities. And as the great Oprah Winfrey said, I always think Oprah should be quoted in everything, by the way, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So now that we've looked at vision and intention setting, I also wanted to touch on the last concept, which is purpose. And this one is probably the most challenging one, and the one that takes the longest time, because I feel that this is an advanced practice of mindfulness. It takes time to work out what your purpose is. And I encourage you to do some reading on this, to discuss purpose in your circle of friends. There's lots online on different definitions of purpose and how to find your purpose, and also to experiment with different definitions of your own purpose. But there's something I heard many, many years ago, which was actually a TED talk. And this was by a researcher who really inspired me, called Dan Buettner, who wrote a book called Blue Zones. And what they did here is that Dan Buettner worked out that there were some parts in the world where people managed to live a really long and really healthy and really happy life. In fact, most of them managed to live beyond 100 years. And what Dan Buettner and his team wanted to find out is whether or not there was a de facto formula for a healthy and happy life. So they identified 7 different blue zones, and I actually went and lived in one for a while, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But the one that I want to focus on today is a blue zone they found all the way on the other side of the planet, on a little island about 800 miles south of Tokyo. On the archipelago of Okinawa, which is actually 160 little islands. I didn't know that, 160 little islands. On the main island, on the northern part of the main island, they found the ground zero of longevity. And this place is where they found the oldest living female population in the world. And not just that, the oldest living happy female population in the world. I absolutely love that idea that somewhere there's an island with lots of old, happy women. But beyond that, it's quite a broad definition, actually. They found that the people there had the longest disability-free life expectancy. They only had a tiny percentage of the rate of colon and breast cancer compared to the United States. And they also only had about the 1/6 of the rate of cardiovascular disease. So they really wanted to work out what the secret was, what was the formula. And what they found in all the blue zones and globally is, yes, there's a lot about diet and broader lifestyle. So there's a lot about eating vegetables and fruit and the color in them. There's things on eating smaller portions and eating fewer calories. There's also things about the habit of eating food and the culture of eating food, and even how you serve your food. But in Okinawa, there was something very different from all the other blue zones. It was different from the islands in the Mediterranean and different from what they saw in South America. In the Okinawan language, they didn't have a word for retirement. And this absolutely blew my mind. I thought this is just such a radical thing, because in Western capitalism, we think of our lives as work, 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 and then you go off and build a pension, and at some point you retire. And I don't know about you, but retirement to me is sort of cruises and then armchairs and reading magazines, and then at some point, eventually, you end up in a nursing home. But in Okinawa, they had something else. And here they had something called ikagai. Next slide, please, Caroline. Slide 4, please. And ikagai is essentially, roughly translated as the reason for getting up in the morning. So I'll leave you to Google this in your own time, but it's basically a breakdown of these 4 elements: that which you love, that which the world needs, that which you can be paid for, and that which you are good at. So ikagai is an overlap of your mission, your vocation, your profession, and your passion. And what they found in Okinawa is that the local karate master was 102 years old and he was still teaching karate. The local fisherman was still fishing for his family 3 times a week. And for example, there was a woman, she was 102 years old, and for her, her ikagai was her great, great, great granddaughter. And Dan Butner actually asked this woman, what does it feel like to hold your great, great, great granddaughter? And the woman held her head back and smiled and said, it feels like leaping into heaven. So a few years ago, I actually went and traveled into one of these blue zones in South America, and it was a town called Vilcabamba in Ecuador. And I'd ended up there by complete accident. And what I found was just absolutely remarkable. There are quite a lot of people my age, so backpackers who just wanted an adventure, a lot of them interested in healing modalities and yoga and mindfulness and plant medicine. But this entire town was full of a lot of people who were refusing to retire. They had run away from Western capitalism. A lot of them were American, but lots of Europeans. And they all looked like they had gone to Woodstock in 1968. And they all looked like they had done drugs in those days and had a really, really good time. But they were not interested in retiring. And I cannot tell you how beautiful Ecuador is. So Ecuador is close to the equator, hence the name Ecuador. And it's the land of eternal spring. And if you close your eyes and think of paradise, so any image you've ever seen of paradise in any of those biblical paintings or perhaps in movies and films, to me, that is what Ecuador is. There's just an abundance of just flowers and beautiful, beautiful mountains. And this town, Vilcabamba, is in the lower Andes region of Ecuador. And actually the ancient Inca Empire, royalty used to go and hang out in this town. And I was there for about 2 months. I actually planned to go there for about 5 days and ended up there for 2 months. And the schedule there is that you sort of wake up and then there's a little town square and you sort of stumble into the square, and there's on the corner of that town square is a place called the Juice Factory, and you can go off and get a smoothie there and have your breakfast. But most importantly is that is what everyone else did. And every time I showed up there, someone would have a seat at their table for me. And every time I sat down, I was usually talking to someone who was often a lot older than I was. And these were people who were retired psychotherapists, astrologers, energy healers, engineers, physicists, commercial airline pilots. And they actually all kept working. They all kept infusing each other with ideas. They kept starting new projects. They would buy land. Someone would consult them on engineering, and they kept swapping their skills and inspiring each other. And one of the things that I'm really, really grateful for is that ultimately this gave me a model of how I wanted something in the future, that I refuse to retire. I will hold my vision. I will keep at it with my intentions. I will stay true to my purpose and find the community and the people that I want to be around. Thank you. We'll just close off the slides, Caroline. So if I could just leave you with a parting thought before I hand over to the wonderful Stacie, is that I've shown you a lot of circles today, and there's some circles behind me as well. And something I've realized over the years in our industry, in the investment management industry, is that our world is about numbers. So you see numbers on a sheet of paper and you see line graphs. But actually, when you go off into nature, there's not many line graphs in nature. A lot of nature is about cycles, and we're always slowly in motion. Actually, anytime you have a chance to go out and meditate in the wild, you'll realize that there's a beautiful, effortless poetry. There's a natural rhythms. Things come and things leave. There's high tide and there's low tide. The sun rises and the sun sets. And it's the same with new beginnings. There's always a good time to start again and reset. And in fact, if you look at all the religions, all the wisdom traditions, they encourage you to take 1 day a week off. And in my own ethnic tradition, which is Sri Lankan Buddhism, but also, as I found, in South American traditions and even in Californian yoga centers, I found that people pay attention to the moon. And this is only something I started looking at about 10 years ago. So they use the moon as a signpost, as a natural rhythm to see where they should be going with themselves. So today is a full moon. So it's a perfect day. And this is a good time to let go. Full moon's a good time to let go of things, to meditate on what no longer serves you, what no longer serves your higher self. And in a few weeks' time, there'll be a new moon. And this is a good time to set intentions and to get things going. So I hope some of this has been really useful to you. And it is my great pleasure to hand over to Dr. Stacie Graham. Thank you.
Thank you, Dinesha. So in this part of the session, we'll be working really to integrate some of the things we just heard. So it's always important to recognize that mindfulness isn't something that is limited to meditation. Often those two words are conflated as mindfulness is equal to meditation. However, there is mindfulness meditation, and then there's mindfulness more broadly. And so I'd like to help you bring your awareness to the opportunity that mindfulness presents us with understanding that new beginnings aren't something that we have to wait on. As Dinesha mentioned, there's this arbitrary line that we draw on December 31st, but time doesn't really work like that. It's only been, historically speaking, relatively recently that we started even using clocks in the way that we do today, right? Where every minute counts, every second counts. So with mindfulness, we have the opportunity to be reminded that everything is happening in the present. I'll let that land for you. Everything is happening in the present. So even when we're thinking about the past, we're thinking about the past in the present. Similarly, when we're looking to the future, we're thinking about the future in the present. There is nothing else but the present moment. And that doesn't mean that we neglect or forget about the past. It doesn't mean that we don't plan for the future. It just means that we understand that everything is happening right now. And so we often lose a lot of time worrying about the next meeting or worrying about when lockdown will end or whatever it may be. And then all of a sudden it's upon us. And it's very different than how we imagined it, how we worried about it, the anxieties that arose during that time. And so what does that mean for us in our daily lives? That how do we make that tangible? So I want to offer you a few practices to connect Dinesha's offering to mindfulness. So if you are in a seated position already, I invite you to Readjust in your seat. It doesn't matter if you're seated in a chair or on your sofa. Maybe some of you are even seated on the floor. But come into a position where you recognize that your spine can lengthen into its natural curve, your shoulders can relax. You feel connected through the ground, perhaps through your feet, being planted on the ground in a parallel position. And I invite you to just sit here for a moment. Sitting here, connecting to your seat, connecting to the earth, feeling the ground beneath you. Is it possible to just notice what's happening in the body? The body is never still. Can you make those observations without judgment of something being really good or really bad, or feeling good or feeling bad? To help you tune into that space that Denisha described, we'll practice and just one of many breathing practices where you're invited to count your breath. So, counting your breath without trying to control its depth or rhythm at this time. Simply count as you inhale and notice what number you get to. And then, similarly, as you exhale, count your breath and notice what number you get to without trying to control anything at this stage. Simply counting as you inhale and counting as you exhale. And I'll give you a few moments to do that. You might find that your exhalation is naturally a bit longer, and that's for most people, but that might not be the case for you. You might naturally have the breath at similar lengths. And so now, without changing anything on your exhalation, I invite you to inhale for 4 counts and then exhale naturally, however long your exhalation is. So inhaling for 4 counts and exhaling naturally. And I'll just give you a few moments to practice that. And now I invite you to switch. So inhaling on a natural count and then exhaling for 4 counts. Inhaling naturally, however long is natural for you, and then exhaling for 4 counts. And I'll just give you a few moments to try that. And now I invite you to inhale for 4 counts, pause if you can for 1 or 2 counts, and then exhale for 4 counts. So it's inhaling for 4 counts, pausing for a count or two, and then exhaling 4 counts. And again, I'll give you a few moments to just try that out. And now check in with yourself and notice where you are now. How does the body feel in comparison to how it felt before? Again, not to judge it as right or wrong or good or bad, but just to check in. What has perhaps shifted in your body, specifically in your body? I like to call this kind of your reset. So there's a lot of different ways that you can reset, but there's an opportunity in bringing your awareness to the breath and trying to count the breath in its natural rhythm first, and then bringing in a more a process approach, if you will. You'll recognize that within just a few rounds of that, somehow the energy is shifted. So when you're about to go into a meeting, that's kind of a problem right now. We have all these back-to-back meetings, and because we're not traveling, they really do get scheduled, one after another. And sometimes you find you don't have time to, even go to the loo. You don't have time to eat lunch. You don't have time to drink water because so many of the calls are on video. You're feeling drained, whereas before they may have just been a quick actual call. Today we're on video looking at people, and there's a lot of research coming out currently explaining why being on video all the time is really hard for us. And I recognize the irony in saying that on a Zoom call. But if you can take the time, you don't need long, even just a minute or two, to reset with the breath. It might just be taking a few deeper breaths. It might be counting the breath. It might be extending your inhalation, extending your exhalation. You're resetting it. There are actual neuroaffective uh, consequences from manipulating the breath in this way. So, just one opportunity to reset whenever you need it. If you're feeling tired while you're working, before you go into a meeting, after you've eaten, whatever it may be. So, that's one practice. Now, I'd like to offer you a practice for when you're feeling like it's time to start that process of setting intentions. Setting intentions, I like to explain sometimes that there are differences between intentions and goals. Often goals are very outcome or results oriented. We often find ourselves, if we don't get the desired outcome that we were hoping for, the desired result, it puts a bad taste over all of the effort that went into it. Whereas with intentions, we are coming from a process approach where, irrespective of the outcome, as Denisha said, we can find, we can be curious, and we can find joy and interest in how we get to wherever we're going, rather than sacrificing the integrity of the entire process to achieve a desired outcome. So when you're making intentions, setting intentions, no matter what they may be, if it's doing your vision board, or if it's something smaller, when you're, perhaps your company works with SMART goals or whatever it may be, thinking about setting intentions for your personal and professional um, uh, development, if you will, it can be really easy to go straight to the head. That's kind of the society that we live in collectively. We're very cognitive focused. We want analytical approaches. We want data. We want to see the numbers and so forth. So, how do we move from the very heavy head into lower parts of the body to really tune into kind of instinctual and intuitive wisdom that each of us has? So there are two practices I'd like to offer you. Again, maybe you've shifted, coming into that seated position again, loosening up, kind of rolling the shoulders, and then coming to stillness when you're ready. Now, I invite you to bring your awareness to um, the point right above the navel. In Japanese culture, it's called the hara. So Hara, hara. Bring your awareness to that area that is, if you're at your navel, and then just just below the navel. And for some of you, you might not feel anything and you might think, what are we doing here? I don't recognize anything right below my navel. And for some of you, you might have um, you might have a lot of action happening in that area right now, depending on what you were doing right before or what you're doing now. And that's fine. It doesn't matter. Either way works. It's just about, getting a sensation. You can even take your hand to the area if it helps to kind of waken it up and think about, okay, this is what this area feels like. Poke, poke, poke. And now resting the hand again and just taking a few breaths so that when you inhale, that part of the body is activated just below the navel. Inhaling deeply. You might even pause the breath, but you don't have to. Feeling into the sensation that's right below the navel. And this is an area that is connected to your creativity, is connected to your power, is connected also to some of our more instinctual reactions. It's a very fundamental part of who we are, but we don't always um, tap into it with intention. It can sometimes just drive us because it's been with us for a very long time. So again, just taking a few more breaths here, tapping into that area, noticing any sensations. And then if you're still here with me on this journey, you can take your awareness a bit higher to what is considered the heart center. So obviously the heart is not in the center of the chest, but the heart center is typically in the center of the chest. And you can take one hand, you can take two hands, you don't have to use your hands. And again, just take a few breaths here. And as you inhale, ensure that you're starting from the lower abdomen and inhaling into this chest area. Um, and then allowing the inhalation to continue to travel, but ensuring that you're filling the lungs so that that heart center actually moves. And that's why the hand on the chest can be really useful to feel the movement of the heart center as you breathe. And I'll let you just take a few breaths doing that. So depending on who you are and what your needs are and who you are in any given moment, right? Because we're different people depending on the day, depending on how well we've eaten, depending on how stressed we are, depending on the weather outside, depending on what your needs are when you're moving into a place of wanting to set your intentions. If you feel like your creative side is just completely underutilized right now, or you're not feeling a lot of opportunities to tap into that creativity, or not in the way that you want, or you're feeling like disempowered and you want to tap into your power again, I invite you, when you're creating your intentions, to do some exercises like we just did, where you're just focusing on that hara right below the navel, that power center, that creative center that offers us strength and guides us from a more intuitive place. And if you are someone who feels like the head is very heavy, you can get stuck in your head, you're going in circles, you have narratives that are on loop, or you're just very analytical and you want to make all of your decisions based on as much certainty as possible. In that case, doing some exercises where you're breathing into the heart center and bringing your awareness to the heart so that some of that energy can move out of the very heavy head. And then once you've done that, and really trying to sit with it for, perhaps 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever is available to you, 2 minutes even, before setting your intentions. And then, of course, for our vision process, when we're visioning, um, we want to connect that power center or that heart center to the higher centers. And so I invite you here now to lower your gaze or close your eyes, even if you're in a space where you feel comfortable to do so. And with lowered gaze or eyes closed, bringing your awareness to this area between your eyebrows, what's often called the third eye. And bringing your awareness, you don't have to necessarily, some people, there are some instances where meditating, they'll ask you to actually move the eyes towards the third eye, but you don't have to do that today. But bringing your awareness to that third eye area and just breathing naturally without trying to control the rhythm or depth of your breath. And again, as you inhale, it's connecting that power center, that creative force, to the heart center, that opening and compassionate area, to the third eye, that area of wisdom. And then exhaling, all of course at your own pace. And for some of you, the third eye might not work or feel available to you, and that's absolutely fine. And you can alternatively take your inner eye to the crown of the head and feel. And if you have really thick hair like me, it can sometimes feel really hard to identify what is actually the crown of the head. And it's not so important to find that really specific place unless you're trying to do headstand. But when you're sitting for mindfulness practice, it's more about feeling the crown of the head opening, the expansion, knowing that we're not limited in our knowledge and in our connection to this flesh, these physical bodies that we have. We're all connected through energies that we can sometimes sense, but we don't necessarily see. And so when you inhale, again, coming from that power force, that creative center, you can imagine a light spiraling up at the base of the spine, spiraling through that power center, that heart center, but all at the spine, and then traveling and leaping, so to speak, and spreading and expanding from the crown of the head. And so I'll let you practice that for a few breaths. Again, maybe the eyes are closed or the gaze lowered, taking the breaths in your own pace. And for you, if it's not a spiral of light, it might be rays of light reaching up. It might be something else altogether. But connecting to whatever is calling you, whatever you're seeing before your eyes in this moment. And then releasing yourself from that practice. And then simply tuning in and noticing what's happening now. How does the body feel now? How does the mind feel now? Can you tune into the feelings of the body where no words are necessary? And you might be feeling different parts of your body that we didn't even speak on specifically. And that's fine. Taking another few breaths here, allow them to deepen and become more intentional. Recognizing that when you leave this space, you're leaving differently than when you came into this space. Also, a new beginning. Harnessing the powerful energy of the full moon lunar eclipse in Sagittarius that we experienced earlier today. knowing that this is a great time to release yourself of old burdens, old things that you need to let go of as we move into this eclipse season. Perhaps there are things you wanted to let go of before Mercury stations retrograde and all communications break down. But just noticing where the body is now. And again, very specifically, where is the body right now? Because the body is always in the present, even when the mind isn't. The body is always our opportunity for a new beginning because the body is always present. And with that, I will hand back over to Dinesha. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stacie. I think the hardest part of working with you is that you really do get me into the zone. Then I have to switch the video back on and get back into presenter mode. So yes, with that, we'll close off here. It's been such a great honor to deliver these 3 sessions with Diversity Project. Such a great opportunity. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed sharing the space with you, Stacie. Thank you for that great honor. But more importantly, I've really enjoyed sharing the space with all our participants today. Thank you for showing up. Please do reach out to us on LinkedIn. I can see some really nice comments coming in. Thank you very, very much. That means a lot to us. Connect with us on LinkedIn. Do recommend us onwards. You know where to find us. I hope that today's session has helped you find a few more clues and tools on creating your own vision, on setting some intentions, finding your purpose, and resetting through your breath. It's the most powerful thing I have, is my breath. And I thank you, Stacie, for bringing that back up to us. I also hope that you're able to approach these tasks with curiosity and joy, especially in your intention setting, and that you remember to stay intuitive and instinctual. A lot of the type of work that we do in the investment management industry doesn't really support that. So this is a way to hold our superpower. So I thank you very, very much, and stay well. And I very much hope that we will see you all very, very soon. All the best. Thank you. Bye.